They say a wedding is the happiest day in a woman's life. But for me, it was the day the groom pressed my face into a 5-tier wedding cake in front of 200 elegant guests and sneered, "Have a taste, you penniless old man." I stood there with frosting dripping from my chin onto my old suit amid the flashes of cameras and the roar of delighted laughter. No one knew that. Only minutes later, that entire room would fall silent when a truth I had hidden for 20 years thundered like a storm. Assets worth more than $400 million, and a lesson the groom's whole family would never forget. Before I tell you the whole story that shook all of Newport, please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. Your support is the motivation that helps me keep revealing the secrets many people want to bury. I used to think the first dinner with the in-laws would be a chance to bond. But that night, under the blazing crystal light of a luxury restaurant in Newport, I learned what it meant to receive society's silent slap, reserved for those considered poor and insignificant. The long table was draped in white linen, and crystal glasses were lined up neatly. The scent of red wine blended with grilled seafood, so luxurious it felt suffocating. I sat in the middle, beside my daughter Emily and her future husband Tyler Whitmore. Across from us were Richard and Sylvia, his parents. Around us were loud laughs and talk of stocks, real estate, and yachts. Yet at our table, every word was a cold blade aimed straight at me. Richard set his knife down and raised his head, his gray eyes as cold as steel. He cut off my comment about a simple outdoor wedding I had seen in a park. "Daniel, we understand. Not everyone is in a position to afford things. As long as you know your limits." Limits? The word fell like a sentence. Emily had just opened the velvet box I handed her. Inside was a vintage silver necklace with a small, Victorian-patterned pendant. Simple yet exquisite. I had chosen it from an antique shop, believing it would become an heirloom. As my daughter opened the box, the crystal light shone down, reflecting off the silver with a gentle gleam. A smile flickered on her lips. But in a moment, Sylvia tilted her head, her diamond earrings flashing. She glanced at the old jacket I was wearing, then smiled sweetly, her words dripping with venom. "How touching that you still tried to prepare a gift." "Emily, dear, this necklace is adorable. It looks familiar, like the things they sell at the Walmart counter, doesn't it?" The air froze. Richard cleared his throat, his sardonic tone sharp as a knife. "Adorable indeed. But for my daughter, I usually choose Cartier, or at least Tiffany. These days, Walmart knows how to make mass-market jewelry look like the real thing." A small laugh popped from Tyler's friend's side, soft but as pointed as a blade. Emily lowered her head, lips pressed tight. She still held the box, but her shoulders trembled. Tyler put an arm around her, smiling as wide as he could. "Don't worry, Em. After this wedding, you won't have to sit at a wobbly dining table in that Portland house anymore. We Whitmores have enough to take care of you for life." The table went quiet for half a second. Then Sylvia chuckled lightly, as if nodding in agreement. I swallowed my bite of salmon, my mouth bone dry. The plate in front of me cost nearly a week's wages for an entire row of factory workers. But that fish suddenly tasted bitter. Richard raised his glass and spoke loudly for the table to hear. "Daniel, rest easy. Tonight's dinner may equal a whole month of household necessities at your home. But don't worry, we are used to covering such expenses." Those sounds, those words, cut sharper than any audit report I had ever held in my life. I looked around. The servers glided past like ghosts, pouring wine without daring to lift their eyes. Other patrons laughed and talked happily, unaware of the social execution playing out in the middle of the dining room. Inside my coat pocket, my hand shook. I had spent a lifetime dissecting balance sheets and stripping away accounting tricks, but I had never seen a balance sheet of character as cruel as this night. They were valuing me not by numbers, but by status. Dinner ended. The bill lay inside a glossy black leather folio. Richard didn't even glance at it. He pulled out a platinum card and slashed his signature. The server bowed deeply, well aware the tip was worth a month's wages. Outside, Newport streetlights reflected off a gleaming Mercedes S-Class. Sylvia climbed in, her mink coat brushing the tile. Tyler helped Emily along, then looked back at me with a half-smile. "See you soon, Mr. Carter," Richard said in a honeyed, mocking tone. "Let us handle what truly matters." I padded to my old Ford pickup. The engine rasped to life, a hoarse growl swallowed by rows of polished luxury cars. Emily sat beside me in silence. Her hand trembled on her dress, but she didn't hold mine the way she used to. I gripped the steering wheel, humiliation surging like an undertow. All my years as an auditor, I had exposed multi-million-dollar frauds and stared down lying CEOs. Yet I had never witnessed a social audit as vicious as this. In the rearview mirror, the restaurant's crystal lights blurred. I heard Emily sigh. I wanted to say, "Honey, we don't need them." But I stayed silent, because I knew this was not just a dinner. It was a test, and I also knew what I would do. Keep quiet. Let them believe I was poor. Let them reveal their true faces. The night after the Newport dinner, I sat alone in my small wooden house in Portland. The desk lamp cast a warm yellow on the old wooden tabletop, full of faint scratches. Traces from when Emily did fourth-grade math, here sharpening pencils until they scarred the wood. A cup of cold coffee sat at my elbow. I didn't bother to sip. In my coat pocket was the empty velvet box, hollow like my chest. Sylvia's words kept ringing. "Walmart, isn't it?" A sweet smile, sharper than a knife. Then Richard, his tone casual as if reading a report. "This dinner equals a month of household necessities at your place." I had heard thousands of numbers used to insult or flatter, but never before had I seen myself reduced to a negative figure on someone else's balance sheet. The phone on the table lit up. Emily texted, "Dad, I'm sorry about tonight." Just 8 words, enough to choke my heart. My girl wasn't the culprit, but she was being dragged into the net. I let the message sit there as the screen dimmed. I knew she was stuck between her love for me and the Whitmore's vortex. I stood and went to my study. The small safe clicked as I turned the familiar code. Inside was an old brown leather file, its edges gone soft with years. I opened it to stock certificates, tax returns, a faded Forbes article showing me shaking hands with Martin Hayes 20 years ago under the headline, "From $7,500 to $5.1 million, the gamble of an Oregon auditor." I stared at that paper for a long time, then gave a faint, bitter smile. People remember noisy deals. Most real success grows silently in the dark. I had always kept that secret for myself, not out of fear, but because I wanted Emily to grow up in a world where dignity mattered more than wealth. To Emily, I was just a frugal father who could still provide a steady life. She knew I could pay for college, buy her a used car, and cover what was necessary. But she had never seen the investment files, never imagined the true assets in the safe. In her eyes, I was a simple dad with some savings, and I wanted to keep it that way until the day the truth spoke for itself. I closed the file and pushed it deep into the safe, locking it tight. No one but Martin had ever known the truth in there, and I intended to keep it that way. The phone lit again, a message from Emily. "I love you, Dad. Just give me time." I leaned back in the chair. Time? I feared time would only let the Whitmore net cinch tighter. I remembered the call the week before, the day Emily announced her engagement. She chattered about the romantic proposal and the dinner with the in-laws. I cut in and said, "Emily, I only want you not to say anything about my work or money. Let them think I'm just an ordinary old man who lives simply. When people believe there is nothing to exploit, they show their true nature." She went quiet for a long moment, and then her voice trembled. "That sounds a little manipulative." "Why, Dad?" I looked into the yard where the tomato plants Emily had planted as a child were leafing out. I remembered her at 8, sitting in the dirt with muddy hands, looking up and saying, "Dad, I'll take care of this plant so it grows up like you take care of me." I had answered, "Because seeds show themselves truly, only when no one forces them. People are the same." She sighed, then yielded. "Fine, but promise me you won't embarrass me." I said, "Of course, sweetheart." And that promise now hung over me like a tightrope, forcing me to swallow humiliation to preserve my daughter's pride. I stepped onto the porch. Portland's wind carried the damp smell of soil from the garden. Cold and familiar, I whispered, "All right, if they want to believe I'm poor, I'll let them, and their belief will destroy them." That night wasn't the last time. Just a few days later, the Whitmores invited me to a wedding planning discussion. I understood it was their way of testing whether I could fit in. We sat in the Whitmore mansion's living room, the polished wood floor reflecting our shapes. On the table lay a long list of venues, all extravagant: the Grand Pavilion Newport, the Breakers in Palm Beach, even a villa in Capri. I sat quietly, looking at the figures below. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Tyler leaned back, smug. "Mom, Dad, I think our honeymoon should be the Maldives, private jet, an overwater villa. Emily deserves it." I caught my daughter's eyes, briefly flustered. Before I could speak, Sylvia turned to me, sugary sweet. "Mr. Daniel, you don't need to worry about costs. We know your circumstances. Just wear your old suit as long as it's ironed." Richard nodded without any courtesy. "Right. You just need to show up as long as you don't throw off the ceremony's tone. We'll handle the rest." Emily bit her lip and tried to speak up. "My dad always prepares properly. He knows how to—" Richard cut her off, voice cold. "Resourceful, I know. But my son's wedding isn't the place to test resourcefulness." Silence fell. I heard the grandfather clock ticking in the hall. This time, I said nothing. I sat there and swallowed each insult like a slow knife. I saw Emily looking at me, her eyes a mix of pain and panic. She wanted to defend her father, but her voice was too small, swallowed up by a room gilded with gold and silver. As I left, I stepped down the marble stairs quietly. The mansion's lights blazed behind me, and my old Ford waited by the gate like a stray. I knew clearly this was only the beginning. They didn't need to shout that I was poor. They brushed on layers of mockery and drops of pity to paint me over. And I let them, because the more fake paint they used, the brighter the truth would shine when it was stripped away. The road from Newport back to Portland felt longer than any other day. I drove the old Ford, the yellowed headlights cast over rain-wet pavement. Emily sat in silence, hands clenching her purse. For half an hour there was only the steady swish of the wipers and the hoarse engine. Finally she spoke, small but sharp. "Dad, I think you're being hard on Tyler." I tightened my grip. "Hard? You didn't see the way he smiled when his mother humiliated me." She turned, her eyes bright in the dark. "Dad, they just live that way. They didn't mean to humiliate anyone." I laughed, a dry sound in the cramped cab. "They didn't mean it when they called my gift Walmart. They didn't mean it when they said my old suit only needs to be clean. Think about it. If they look down on me like that, do they really respect you?" Emily bit her lip and fell silent, then blurted like a knife, "You're suffocating me. You don't trust me to be mature enough to choose who I love. You're controlling." That word hit harder than anything Richard had said. I looked at her face under the streetlights, angry and afraid. "You think protecting you is control?" I asked slowly. Emily drew a breath, eyes glistening. "I just want you to trust me. Trust that I know what I need. I don't want to choose between you and Tyler." I pulled into a gas station and braked. Emily startled. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. I killed the engine and leaned back. "Sweetheart," I looked at Tyler with an auditor's eyes. "I see numbers that aren't honest, and I see a character that isn't honest. I don't want you to pay with your life. Emily unbuckled, eyes aflame. You don't understand. Tyler is different when it's just the two of us. He's good. He cares. You only see the bad. She opened the door. Cold wind and gas fumes flooded in. I hurried. Emily, listen. But she was already outside, phone in hand, voice shaking. I'll call Tyler to pick me up. At least he respects my decisions. The door slammed, leaving me alone in the dark. I sat still, looking through a fogged windshield. Outside, my daughter walked quickly toward the bright convenience store, high heels tapping the wet concrete. The phone screen glowed in her hand. I knew exactly whom she was calling. I sat there with wind whistling through the door seams, my heart heavy as stone. For the first time in my life, I saw clearly. Between me and my daughter, a small crack had opened. Small, but enough to split a home in two. The phone stayed silent in the days that followed. I kept the ringer all the way up, carried it in my pocket in the garden, and set it by my pillow at night. But the screen never lit with Emily's number. The first day, I told myself she needed time. On the third day, I began leaving voicemails. Emily, it's Dad. I just want to say I love you. Call me when you're ready. My voice stayed steady. By the second week, steady turned to pleading. Sweetheart, I've thought about that night. Maybe I was too harsh. But please believe everything I do is for you. We can figure this out if you give me a chance. I replayed my own voice, lonely and shaking. Late at night, I sat alone in the living room, the light reflecting on framed photos along the wall. Emily was 8, holding a basketball bigger than she was. Emily at graduation, fingers gripping my hand. Each picture was a blade reminding me that the distance was growing. By the third week, I noticed something else. A former colleague sent me a Facebook link. On the screen, a poor father trying to cling to his daughter, making up stories about our family. An anonymous post, but everyone could guess the source. Beneath it, dozens of comments. Shameless. Poor and arrogant. I sat still, watching the shares climb. My gut twisted, not because of the cruelty, but because I knew Emily was reading it too, and I wasn't sure she was strong enough to resist. I began to collect screenshots, saving each comment. The old profession in me, the auditor, stirred. If they thought slander could drown me, they forgot I'd spent a lifetime tracing every number and comma to find the truth. But there is a chasm between reason and the heart. By day, I pretended to be busy myself with tomato beds and the pots Emily had planted. By night, I sat silent, eyes fixed on the screen, waiting for a message, a call. Nothing. Only cold status updates and photos of my daughter beside Tyler at lavish parties, where the flashes were blinding and her smile was stiff, a stiffness only I could see. On the 25th night, I couldn't stand it. I drove past Emily's apartment in the Pearl District. Her car was there. The living room lights were on. I stopped on the street and cut the engine. I didn't go in. I just needed to know she was still there, still existing. But even with that light spilling out, the distance stayed unbridgeable. I turned the car around, leaving my shadow swallowed by Portland's night. On the 30th day, I made dinner as usual. Pasta with tomato sauce, her childhood favorite. I set 2 place settings and sat down. The chair opposite stayed empty. I bowed my head and whispered, Sweetheart, when will you come home? And then my phone buzzed. My heart leapt into my throat. On the screen was the name I had waited a month to see. Emily. My finger trembled as I answered. Her voice was soft, smaller than I remembered. Dad, the wedding is tomorrow. The night before the wedding, I sat in my study with the desk lamp shining on an old leather briefcase. Inside was the life I had hidden. I opened it. The rustle of papers sounded familiar. Stock certificates, purchase agreements, and tax schedules have been audited many times. In the middle was an old photo. Martin Hayes, 2 30-year-old guys, hands clasped in a rented office in San Francisco in 2001. My face was lean, hair slicked back, eyes bright with the first time I dared to risk everything I had. I remembered clearly the day I withdrew, exactly $7,500. Everything after 2 years of cheap ramen and boxes of mac and cheese, walking instead of taking the bus. Two young founders came with an old laptop and a fledgling idea for an online data sharing platform. Their voices shook as they said, "We just need enough to rent an office for 3 months and buy another server. If we fail, you'll lose your money. But if we succeed..." I looked into their eyes and saw the same fire I saw in my own mirror every morning. I said, "Deal. But I want 10%. 6 months later, the first big contract was signed. 18 months later, a tech giant acquired the company. The check I held then was worth $5.1 million. I sat in my shabby apartment staring at the numbers in my account, knowing my life had turned. But I didn't rush out to buy a sports car or a mansion. I did one thing. I reinvested. 20 years passed, stock by stock, property by property, clean energy funds. I didn't live lavishly, but every dollar grew quietly. By now, that portfolio was worth over $400 million, a figure that would make any board of directors show respect. And I kept it hidden, like a family secret. I wanted Emily to grow up where love and kindness mattered more than money. She once asked, "Dad, why don't we move to a bigger house? All my friends live in new places." I smiled and patted her head. "Because this house holds our history, and because you need to learn that happiness isn't measured in square footage." She sat still, big eyes round, then nodded as though she understood. But now I saw that choice become a double-edged sword. Because no one knew my real worth, they freely humiliated me. They turned me into a joke. I stacked the documents back into the case and spun the lock. Inside was more than paper. It was the proof of a lifetime. Proof that would shatter every sneer. I pulled out a thin sleeve, a photocopy of the Forbes article where my face appeared beside the line. The Oregon auditor who saw the future. I knew a single minute standing up with that file would still the Whitmore's glittering room. But I also knew it wasn't the time. A battle only matters when you choose the right moment. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window looking at the tomato garden, the leaves shivering in the wind like a whispered reminder. I wondered what Eleanor, my late wife, would say if she were alive. Perhaps she'd say, "Daniel, let your daughter see the truth for herself. Please don't force it. Don't shout. Let the truth ring on its own." I chuckled to myself. The truth can be silent, but tomorrow night, at that wedding, I would force it to ring loud. On the 31st day since my daughter stepped out of the old Ford at the gas station, my phone finally rang. I was in the living room with a cold dinner in front of me, 2 portions of pasta with tomato sauce, but only one person was eating. When the screen lit up, my heart pounded. Emily's name glowed in green. I answered, voice hoarse. "Hello, sweetheart?" There was a pause, then she spoke, small and tight. "Dad, the wedding is tomorrow. I want you to come." The sentence stabbed my chest, joy and pain at once. I jumped up, the chair clattering behind me. "Thank you, Emily. I'll be there." I thought I could finally breathe, but before I could, her voice came again, colder and sharper. "But with one condition." I froze. "Condition? You cannot say anything about Tyler. No comments, no attitude, no frowning. I know the way you furrow your brows and purse your lips. Just a look, and I know you disapprove. Tomorrow I don't want to see that. This is my wedding. It must be perfect." I went silent, hearing the blood drum in my ears. Every word tied me tighter. "Emily!" I tried to keep calm. "I only want what's best for you. Are you sure?" Her voice cut in, sharp and shaking. "Promise me, Dad. If not, don't come." I looked at the photo on the wall. Emily at graduation in a blue gown, smile bright, hand gripping mine. I swallowed and answered softly, "I promise." She exhaled in relief, then hung up quickly as if afraid I might change my mind. I stood in the dark room with the cold beep in my ear. I didn't sleep all night. I took my navy suit from the closet, the one I wore on the few formal occasions of my life. I ironed every crease and polished my old black shoes. On the table, I set the wrapped gift, a clear crystal vase worth $68. Just elegant enough, not so fancy as to arouse suspicion. I stared at it, wondering whether Emily would blush in shame like when she received the silver necklace, or if she would truly smile. Outside, Portland was soaked with light rain. I sat by the window listening to it tapping on the roof and whispered, "Tomorrow is her day, but it will also be mine." The next afternoon, I drove my 14-year-old Ford pickup from Portland to Newport. Turning onto the tree-lined road to the Grand Pavilion Hotel, I saw long lines of Bentleys, Mercedes, and Porsches glittering in the sun. To the valets, my truck looked like a stray among rare beasts. A young man in a black suit leaned to the window and, trying to hide his smirk, asked softly, "Sir, are you also attending the Whitmore wedding?" I answered curtly, "I am the bride's father." His smile vanished, replaced by a forced professionalism. "Yes, sir." Entering the main hall, I was nearly blinded by enormous crystal chandeliers. The air was heavy with imported lilies, towering arrangements as tall as a person, shaped like sculptures. Sylvia swept over, voice ringing across the lobby. "Everyone, this is the bride's father." 20 pairs of eyes turned at once, sliding from my simple navy suit to my self-polished black shoes, then stopping at the gift box in my hand. White paper, blue ribbon, clearly not from Tiffany. They produced polite smiles, the rich bestowing glances like alms upon a poor man who wandered into the wrong banquet. As I started toward the photo area, an attendant raised a hand to block me and murmured firmly, "Family photos now. Sorry, sir. Immediate family only." I watched from a distance as Emily, radiant in white, stood between Sylvia and Richard. Her eyes wavered when they met mine. I nodded slightly, swallowing all bitterness so she could be at peace. The camera flashed relentlessly. Hundreds of shots. I, the biological father, was in none of them. In the ceremony hall, the usher pointed. "Row 7, left side." I glanced toward the front, where important people filled the first rows, glittering with diamonds and stock portfolios. I, the bride's father, was placed behind distant relatives and plus ones. The woman beside me whispered. I heard the bride sighed. "Is struggling financially. Thank goodness the Whitmores can handle things." I smiled faintly and replied, "Yes, thank goodness." The ceremony began. The ensemble played. Emily walked the white aisle. Tyler waited at the end, beaming. I did not have the honor of walking my own daughter. Richard, the groom's father, had claimed that role, his hand on Emily's arm like a seal of ownership. With each step they took, my heart was ground down again. After the vows came the cocktail hour. $300 Krug champagne was poured freely, but the trays slid past me as if I didn't exist. I sat alone at a small table, watching them clink glasses and laugh about Tuscany vacations and a newly purchased villa in Miami. I heard Richard call out, "We spare nothing for our daughter's, oh no, our daughter-in-law's happiness, as for her father." He glanced my way and lowered his voice just enough for the group to burst into laughter. In the golden sunset through the glass, I saw Emily pass by, her face radiant, her eyes red. She set a hand on my shoulder and squeezed, whispering, "Thank you for coming, Dad." I looked her in the eyes and nodded. "Today is your day." She smiled, but her lips trembled. Only I, the man who raised her, could see what that smile was hiding. When the last dinner course was cleared, I thought I had endured enough, but they still weren't done. The 6-course meal ended with an extravagant dessert display, a 5-tier wedding cake, a chocolate fountain, and a dessert spread like an art exhibit. I stood before the table, looking at golden glazed towers of cream and costly handmade confections. A server approached politely. "Sir, we have sugar-free mousse and fresh fruit for guests with dietary needs." I nodded, relieved. I always had to be careful with my diabetes, never letting my guard down. But just then a familiar voice blared off key above the crowd. "Sugar-free? Don't tell me you can't afford treatment, so you have to eat like that." The crowd turned. Tyler stood there, face flushed with alcohol, smile warped. I held my temper and answered lightly, "I manage my condition very well." He burst out laughing, loud enough for nearby tables. "Hear that? The bride's father can't even afford to eat his own daughter's wedding cake." Laughter rippled, then cut off, leaving a strange hollow. Eyes fell on me, the poor man, the outsider, the punchline. I looked around and saw Emily hurrying toward us, pale and wide-eyed, but before she reached me, Tyler stepped closer, scooped a big spoonful of cake, and suddenly shoved it into my face. I staggered. Sweet white frosting smeared across my cheeks, slid down my chin, and dripped onto the navy suit I had ironed all night. The room exploded. Screams, laughter, and cameras clicking. "Try the dessert!" Tyler shouted, drunk with delight. I stood still as buttery sweetness coated my mouth, so sugary I could barely breathe. I felt not only my face covered in frosting, but my dignity smeared in front of 200 eyes. Emily screamed, "Tyler, what are you doing?" She rushed in, but Tyler, still manic, spread his arms like a stage actor, "Just helping your dad taste the cake. He's not used to luxury, so I'm helping him get used to it." Whispers flared, a few awkward laughs, some glances skittering away, but some people still held up their phones, filming like it was entertainment. Slowly, I took out my handkerchief and wiped my face, each motion stretching the moment thin. Under the crystals, I saw Emily's eyes, raw with tears, and her hands shaking. Suddenly, smack! A slap cracked the air. Emily had just struck Tyler across the face, hard in front of everyone. The hall froze like a gunshot had sounded. Tyler stood, stunned, hand on his cheek, eyes blazing. Emily shouted, "You humiliated my father in front of everyone." No one laughed now. No one dared breathe. I stood there with frosting still dropping from my chin onto the marble and looked around the crowd, some flushed with secondhand shame, some furtively filming, some gaping. Everyone was forced to see the truth. At the height of an opulent party, a bride had slapped her groom for degrading her own father. The air thickened after the slap. Tyler reeled, cheek blazing red, but arrogance still flickered in his eyes. He shouted, voice cracking, "All this because of this penniless old man? He brings you nothing, Emily. He only drags you into his humiliation." His voice rang through the hall like a final hammer blow on my honor. I kept wiping the last streak of frosting from my face, but inside I knew it was time for the truth to ring. Right then, a deep voice cut through, firm as a gavel. "Enough!" Everyone turned. From table 10 stepped an older man, tall, silver-haired, in a pale gray suit, eyes bright. It was Charles Bowman, founder of Bowman Systems, a face anyone in finance knew. He strode into the center and spoke like a bell. "Perhaps many of you haven't realized, but the man you just humiliated is none other than Daniel Carter, a pioneering investor who laid the first brick for 3 tech companies that today are each worth tens of billions." The room rustled like fire catching. "Daniel Carter?" a woman nearly shrieked. "Impossible! He still drives an old Ford," another whispered. "I read about him in Forbes. 2001. The photo shaking hands with Martin Hayes." I saw Richard and Sylvia's eyes bulge, mouths slack. Tyler went white, fists trembling. Charles continued, slow and steady. 20 years ago, Mr. Carter dared to put all his savings into a young startup. In less than 2 years, that became over 5 million. And he didn't stop. He kept reinvesting, allocating across technology, real estate, and clean energy. Today, the estimated total must be several hundred million. He paused, letting the number drop like thunder. The murmurs swelled. 400 million! More than the Whitmores combined. My God! I lifted my head and looked straight at Tyler. His eyes were wide, breath short. The whole room had turned. Those who had sneered now straightened, their eyes changing from contempt to respect, tinged with fear. People who had been filming lowered their phones, embarrassed to have recorded their own disgrace. Richard stepped forward with a strained smile. Mr. Carter, this is an unfortunate misunderstanding. Had we known earlier... I cut him off, my voice calm, but each word heavy as lead. If you had known I was rich, you would have smiled differently, right? Unfortunately, what you did tonight is the most honest portrait of your family. Emily stood still, tears running. She looked at me, then at Tyler, shaking, lips stammering. Her eyes were confused, but held something new. Recognition. I knew this was the line, the choice that would erupt next. The atmosphere in the wedding hall transformed after Charles Bowman's declaration. The eyes that had pitied me now shone with respect. The Whitmores became puppets with their strings cut. Richard moved forward, face stiff, squeezing out a grin. Mr. Carter, truly an honor. Everything tonight was just a misunderstanding in the wedding mood. Sylvia chimed in, voice pitched high. Exactly. Every family has heated moments. We can start fresh, a clean slate, can't we? I met their eyes and smirked. Start fresh? You call 30 days of humiliation a misunderstanding? Cutting me out of family photos? Shoving me in row 7? Letting your son smash cake in my face in front of 100 people? All that was just a heated minute? My words cracked across their faces. Tyler lunged, babbling, Mr. Carter, if I'd known you were wealthy, I wouldn't... I froze him with an icy stare. If I were poor, then humiliating me would be acceptable? So a person's dignity, to you, is priced by their bank balance. He fell silent, lips quivering, sweat sliding down his collar. Guests murmured. A businessman shook his head. Disgraceful. A society matron whispered, I've never seen anyone demean a future father-in-law like that. The room had fully turned. Richard still tried to salvage the deal, his voice carrying the tone of a desperate negotiation. Mr. Carter, we are family now. Think of Emily, think of their future. Together we could cooperate. Your assets with our influence, I laughed, a dry sound echoing through the hall. Ah, finally you say what you really want. Money. From beginning to end in your family, only money deserves respect, and that is exactly why I will never call you in-laws. Sylvia reached out, voice trembling but still calculating. Think of Emily. She needs stability. Let's forget this and open a new page. I turned to Emily. She was crying, no longer with vague tears, but with the truth uncovered. She shook her head when Tyler tried to grab her hand. I turned back, voice final. There is no clean slate. You raised your son to believe wealth gives him the right to hurt others. And tonight, everyone here has seen the true face of the Whitmores. I set my frosting-stained handkerchief on the table, living evidence of the humiliation they had caused, and stepped back. I'm leaving, but make no mistake. I'm not leaving out of fear. I'm leaving because I've won. I won by letting you expose yourselves before society. The hall was silent except for Richard's ragged breathing, Sylvia's choking sobs, and Tyler's chalk-white face. I turned and walked away. My shoes rang on the marble, slow and sure, the crowd parted, eyes tracking me. As my hand touched the heavy double doors, a voice broke behind me. Dad, wait for me. I stopped, the rustle of a wedding gown on the floor. Then Emily appeared, hair disheveled, mascara streaked, her hand clutching the hem of her expensive white dress. She ran, stumbled once, then rose and rushed to me. In front of 200 guests, my daughter threw her arms around me and sobbed, Dad, I'm sorry. You were right. I was blind. Tyler came after her, grabbing her wrist and shouting in panic, Emily, are you crazy? He's just a stubborn old... The second slap cracked. this time from Emily, strong and decisive. The hall went dead still. She stared at him, eyes red but blazing. You humiliated my father. You showed me who you really are. There is no wedding. There is no us. She pulled off the glittering diamond ring and dropped it. The stone clattered across the marble like a death knell for the Whitmores. Richard collapsed into a chair, ashen. Sylvia reached out and grasped at the air. Tyler staggered, pale with rage and shame. Guests whispered. Phones rose to capture the moment the bride ran after her father, leaving the groom ruined before society. I looked at Emily. Her hand trembled in mine, but her eyes were resolute. I nodded and pushed open the doors. The Newport sea wind rushed in, cold but free. We strode out, leaving behind crystal lights, flutes of champagne, and endless whispers. In the courtyard, my old Ford stood humble among the luxury cars, frozen like stunned beasts. I opened the door and tilted my head. Are you sure? Emily nodded, her smile shaky but sincere. I've never been more sure. We got in. I turned the key. The old engine rumbled, slow but steady, like my life. In the rearview mirror, I saw hurried figures, and the Whitmores, crumpled as a scandal erupted at the center of Newport. Ahead lay the long road back to Portland, to the small wooden house, to the tomato garden where it all began. Emily rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, Dad, I just need you. Money or no money, I understand now. Dignity matters more than anything. I tightened my grip on the wheel, eyes stinging. Outside, the sunset reddened the horizon, gold light washing over us. I whispered, unsure if she heard. We won. Not because of wealth or poverty, but because in the end, you chose the truth. The truck rolled forward, leaving behind all the artificial lights, carrying us back to the little house, where rich or poor no longer mattered. Only father and daughter remain, and a new beginning. If you also believe that dignity and wealth both matter, but only dignity decides whether a person truly deserves the money they have, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me what you think. Your support is the strength that helps me keep exposing the truth. Many families want to hide, and don't forget, the next story may be even more shocking.